Thanks, Rob. You are so awesome. It's great to see everyone here. Hi, friends. Hi, family. Cool. We're on page 51, We Agnostics. And just a little bit of a recap. We're looking at some spiritual terms. We're looking at some new ways to use the word God, some other words to use for God for some of us whose hackles are still rising. But basically, what we're coming to this realization that broken souls need a spiritual life. Bill and I, the format of the meeting is I'll read and comment, and then Bill will jump in every now and then. And we might look at some words, what they mean. We'll look at some of the metaphors. We're just snorkeling around, having some fun. Rob dropped some amazing history into the chat. If I can remember, I might also be able to help you along with that. So keep your eye on the chat. There's tons of stuff going on there. And for our listeners on YouTube, don't worry, we'll make tons of reference to where we can get this information. And then once the hour is up, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough and jump in and ask us questions and just where you're at and just to share anything that jumped out at you tonight. All right, let's get cracking. Page 51, second paragraph. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. So just a couple of comments on this paragraph. Let's ask ourselves, in the middle of this paragraph, it makes a statement. It says, in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. I'm going to switch this up a little bit and make it work for us. Recovery was painfully slow. Has this been your experience ever? And then stop and ask your sponsee, has this been your experience? Has recovery been painfully slow for you? It's not an overnight matter. We claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. And just very quickly on Columbus, I think Rob's already dropped some stuff in there. Columbus had to have been an alky. He convinced a woman to finance his trip to the west and the east, not knowing what was going to materialize either way. But he got her to pay for it twice. He failed the first time and came back and asked for more money, and he got more funding. And then it says here, in the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered. What is fettered? We don't use words like that today, right? That's why a lot of us don't want to surf through this book, because there's some seriously antiquated English knocking about you. But get yourself a dictionary. Google is your best friend. Google these words, because a lot of what holds us back in this process of the book revealing and connecting us to power is our old ideas around words, and then also just prejudice around words. Let's just skip that word. I don't want to not know what a word means. No, I don't want to Google. I know everything. Anyway, I spent some time Googling for those who are the I know everythings. I got my hand up. I'm one of those people, by the way. Our minds were chained by superstition, traditions, all sorts of fixed ideas. If there is anything that encompasses the real work in this program, the real work, besides the honesty and the willingness and the open-mindedness that we ask newcomers and chronic relapses and those guys who've been around a while, never done this work, what besides asking us to bring that to the table, what we really are asking is that we let go of old ideas, let go of superstitions, let go of traditions, So I made a little note here in our column 1 of our step 4 inventory. They ask us to list principles. They ask us to list people that we resent, which is pretty easy. A shit list is very easy to cough up. They ask us to list institutions, schools, governments, lending institutions, institution of marriage. Okay, that was pretty cool. But when they asked me principles, I was like, I have zero idea, because first of all, I was not a principled person. So why are you asking me to talk about principles that I resent, right? So this helped me a lot to look at some of the traditions that I resent, some of the superstitions that still rule the show for me. There were some really neat guidelines for that last little bit of my step 4. We continue. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as unbiased, as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Let's ask ourselves that. I know I've been violently anti-religious. And all these meditation, for instance, let's look at some of the stuff that we're being asked to do in this program. We're asked to pray. I don't have a prayer bead thing. No, that's okay. If you don't, and I don't even know who I'm praying to, that's okay. Let's just look at some of the old ideas around prayer. Look at the old ideas around meditation. I thought I had to sit on a mat, burn a candle, burn some incense, have a little fat dude with a big belly perched somewhere, I don't know, north, east, south, west of my room, because apparently it's bad feng shui if he's in the wrong place. I don't know. Get rid of all of that stuff. Get rid of all those old ideas, because they keep us trapped. We need to venture into new stuff. So we're asking you to let go of this. So are we not being a little bit unreasonable about the realm of the spirit? That's what we're asking you to look at here in We Agnostics. We're asking you, Bill, Rob spoke about it, Bill spoke about it before the meeting started. This prayer that we kicked the meeting off with, the set-aside prayer, I agree with you, brother. It's becoming more and more pertinent to me in my journey. How many old ideas and superstitions and traditions are fettering me to moving forward, to having a bigger experience, more God, more of you, more recovery. Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. So Kitty Hawk, for some of those who may be in the UK or haven't done a little bit of American history, it was the site where the first plane took off. These guys had, they had design after design after design, and their plane took off. And flight happened at Kitty Hawk Airport. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Now, Professor Langley, I went and Googled him this afternoon. I went spent some time with him on Wikipedia. This man was, and he also, I'm sure, what must have been an alky, because he was just breaking rules. He was rebellious, got into a lot of trouble, went against a lot of rules and a lot of institutions at his time. But he was also a father of some incredible inventions. And one of his inventions was a flying machine that never made it. Like it lifted and just crashed. Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved men could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved? Yeah.
I have an intuitive thought. And I'm glad we started with this paragraph that we did. I'm wondering where the fettering came from. Who chained their minds to believe that things were impossible? I'm not real bright, as you know that, and I prove that most of the time. But there was a story about man speaking all these languages, and God confounded them by they were building a Tower of Babel to climb to the heavens. And what happened is the result is that they all spoke a different language, so they couldn't understand each other. If that were the case, we wouldn't have interpreters. And then the people were placed here in paradise, but you can't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We don't want you to get too smart, because then we can't control your minds. I'm wondering where the superstition, the tradition, and the fixed ideas that said, guess what? God's reserved flying to the birds. So someone got a hold of some information and then tried to withhold it from some people. We're talking about a blockage from the world of the spirit that manifested itself into the material realm. So if you were to write this chapter today with the advent of the internet, we're on Zoom, we pop here and there pretty soon, you'll be able to have a relationship with someone that you've never physically touched before, call it a marriage, and be able to have test tube babies or whatever, have an entire family without ever once having held hands. This chapter would be very unnecessary or very outdated if it were written now. Because you got people on this platform today that might not know what a rotary dial telephone looks like, what a black and white TV sitting on stands in the middle of the room, calling it a piece of furniture that was more sacred than the rest of the furniture in the house. Those were things that everyone accepted readily. When you let me sit there and watch Lost in Space on TV, oh my God, now someone's got some people flying around in space on different planets and robots. And it all seems like fantasy, but not to the people who were able to think about it. And the fettering and the tradition and the superstition is we are going to tell you what to think. We are not going to teach you how to think. So I don't think it was so obstinate, afraid of what was going to happen. Oh my God, if I enter into the realm of the spirit or the realm of the scientific inquiry, that I'm going to be struck down unless you give me the premise that there's something that's going to strike me down that you've had an encounter with, as long as you can keep me from having the encounter with that. You get what I'm saying?
You're making me think of that line on page 55 that says, the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. That's it, right? What we were taught
For
to believe, and we
example,
come in here.
when someone tries to teach you on YouTube or whatever those social medias are of how to become a millionaire because they want you to become a multimillionaire like them, and for $49.95 I'm going to teach you. Why do you need the $49.95 if you're the millionaire and you're going to teach me to do the same? You haven't discovered anything new. What you're going to do is get me to pay you to open my mind to stuff that I cannot otherwise comprehend on my own. And what was happening is he's coming along and he's reading the stars. He's not the first one to do it. In another book I was brought up on, they were looking for the stars that had announced the birth of the upcoming king. Wise men followed the stars. The idiots wanted to put them to death. So what this is saying is open your mind. It's your own ignorance, your own agnosticism brought about by someone else's instructing you that if you step outside of the box, there's going to be consequences. And if we can't impose them, the power that we know exists because he's appeared only to us, well, he'll get you. I'm going to be scared to death. Right? First of all, I don't want to go to hell. And second of all, I don't want him to crush me while I'm here. So what I do is I go back to sleep, just like they intend me to, and everything stays status quo. Well, some people were maybe born to do something. We talked about that last week. Never tell a newcomer or a child something's impossible. God may have created them to do that. Where did the desire come to fly? Where did the desire come to study the stars and see what they were telling us? Where did the desire come to see when a tornado or hurricane's coming to town? Someone had a desire put in. And because it wasn't my desire or the masses' desire, what we're going to do is stone you because we don't want that stuff to get out and corrupt the status quo. I mean, it's a very powerful paragraph when you look at it. Now you look at the advance made in our lifetime. A lot of changes my mom's seen.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it goes on to say here. It says only 30 years later, only 30 years later, we're talking about 90 years now. The conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. We've already retired the plane that was the fastest at the time in the 1980s. We've already retired that plane. That's where we're at. Today, we've got planes flying at, what did I see? The Blackbird is flying at 2,500 miles per hour. I don't know. Maybe don't quote me. But I went and Googled. I was like, what is the latest flight advancement? And it's a ridiculous, I don't know if it's miles per hour, maybe, I don't know. Rob, fix what I said. All I know is
It
it's super
takes you
fast.
longer to go through the airport than it does to get from New York to California. Guess what? Pretty soon they might come up with time travel. People
Yeah,
have that idea.
yeah. Well, there's another book that talks about time travel. There was a guy walking through walls and rocking up at shores in an instant, the future king. But we can talk about that in another meeting.
Yeah. I mean, look at
But
what
in
Elon Musk has done. He comes up with ideas that no one can fathom. And is he that much smarter than us? In other words, how high does the IQ go? But there's another IQ, there's a spiritual intelligence that's not steeped in fear and trepidation. And if you do this, you're going to pay a dear price. I won't try anything if you tell me, right? They condition. We're conditioned, and it might not even be intentional. It might be by someone else's conditioning. And what's happening is there's something that's tugging at each and every one of our hearts that compels us that when we become alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, I don't make a conscious choice that God's everything or nothing. When the weight of the world's upon me by the very design, what do? I cry out, God help me, and it doesn't matter what I believed up till that moment. That's why it gives us a story at the end of this chapter that circumstances made him willing to believe. Alcoholism is one of those circumstances that make most of us willing to believe that which we could not otherwise believe.
alcohol was our master. That is it. When you come in here, and the greatest foe that we've known to in our life, to mankind, to alcoholics, is actually the sword that, that chops off the giant's head. All right, back on page 52, second paragraph. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he'll say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new that does? So a longshoreman is a somebody who works on the dock, like just a regular Joe dock worker, not board of director, tons of degrees behind his name, just a regular Joe rocking up at work 9 to 5, blue collar, Monday to Friday, picks up his wages every second week. If you ask him, like, do you think they'd fly to the moon? He'd say, yeah, no, because it was so easy for people to discard old ideas for new. I mean, just like Bill said, look where we are today. This iPhone, I know in a year's time, there's features I know that there are going to be features on this phone that I've not even imagined, and I can't wait for them. I also just want to very quickly talk about the bumblebee and the hummingbird. If you look at the dimensions of those two little creatures, the bumblebee's ratio of its thorax, of its body compared to its wingspan, it is scientifically impossible that that little fat little bee does what it does. It hovers, it has mobility just like a hummingbird, which is like a helicopter. They can kind of just stay in midair and change direction, which is a pretty powerful aerodynamic function. And if you look at the hummingbird, its wingspan compared to its body size, it's also impossible that it flies, but yet they do. Come on, doubters, unbelievers, if you're sitting in this room still going, no, I'm asking you, remember, the key word here is maybe. Bill just said it. All we're asking is bring open-mindedness. Now we're bringing some glaring facts out here, okay? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change. To what are they talking about? To discarding old ideas for new, to grabbing the new Apple iPhone and knowing, like, without a doubt, there'll be some new technology. Can't wait for it. Don't know what the hell it is. I don't even know how they get to do it, but it's coming. So we're asking you to bring that to the following. Now, listen to these questions they're asking us. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. I'm going to stop right there. This, for anybody who's new or back in and maybe forgot a couple of things, these are called the bedevilments on page 52. This is what an untreated alcoholic's life looks like. This is somebody who's not tapped into the power, who's not found a power greater than himself by which he can live and solve all his problems. This is what our lives look like. So here we stop. We ask our newcomer, we're asked the prospect across us, our protege, whatever it may be, the one who's returning for a new experience, the one who keeps relapsing, the brand new soul that's entered these rooms. We stop and we ask them, are you having trouble with personal relationships? Let's ask ourselves here just quietly. Do you find that you are prey to misery and depression? That stuff comes hunting for us. We don't go seeking it. It comes hunting for us, waking us up at 2, 3 in the morning when we should be sleeping soundly because we don't have any alcohol in our body, but we're 18 months and we're dry. And this is what's happening. Can't make a living. Not just some of us in here making good money, but we can't make a living. We're rocking up every day and we're just grim, unhappy, depressed, miserable. That ain't no living. I'm not talking about financial living. I'm not talking about the material world here. There could be that as well. Had a feeling of uselessness. I crossed that out and I said, feeling suicidal thoughts, jumping off point. Why am I here? What's the point? Why am I still alive? Full of fear. My phone rings, immediately my heart starts beating. There's a knock on the door, immediately my heart starts beating. Someone looks up from the desk at the office, immediately I'm terrified. I'm permanently in a state of fear. I don't know who's behind me. I don't know who's coming up next to me. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Our sponsor keeps telling us, sponsor. You're in a 12-step program, get a sponsee, go find a newcomer. And you're sitting there going, I'm not good enough. What have I got to give? I could break them. Are you answering yes to any of these questions? Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments, these questions that we've just asked you, those are the bedevilments. Those are the, you'll hear some people refer to them as the dark promises. More important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar fight. Is it not more important what the new iPhone is going to bring out? Isn't it more important that we have these questions answered? Yes. Yes to these. Happy, joyous, free, making a living, useful, no depression, no suicidal thoughts, no insomnia, no anxiety. Isn't that what we're after?
Mind. I think they're talking about a sober person. They're not talking about a drinking person. And our buddy Jim P spoke on a meeting the other day. It was brilliant. Here's what he said. He said that he knows that God is the author of this book because longshoremen aren't spending a lot of time thinking about going to the moon. And Bill Wilson did, how was he capable of having a vision that within 30 years of this, the attempt to land on the moon would be in full swing? I mean, here's a guy who's a drunk, very smart, very educated, has a lot of information that some of us don't possess. But he's writing about something that's going to take place in our lifetime. And what they're talking about, what I heard my sponsor say, and I never heard it put this way, it doesn't mean it was original. But what this is describing is the spiritual condition. And in step 10, It tells us the maintenance of our spiritual condition. The reason that this stuff is so problematic is my treatment for this condition is to drink. And now I'm sober. And now I've discovered that alcohol might really only be a symptom. When I'm drinking, as I said, it's a pretty big symptom. And on the last day, for most of us, it was the only symptom. But now you've taken alcohol away and you're trying to persuade me to let go of a whole bunch of prejudices because you're introducing me to a power or reintroducing me to a power that I've been trying to avoid. And what I don't realize, my experience is when I'm in these conditions, my perception of God is very similar to the condition of my spirit. When I'm out there violating all those orders, codes of conduct, when I'm finding fault with all of his kids, when I'm at odds with the world, I'm at odds with the power, and he becomes very unapproachable and threatening to me. And what they're telling me is, guess what? The nature of God does not change based on what's going on inside or outside of you. But you need to get a new perspective, because if not, there's a pretty good chance you're going to drink yourself to death, being at odds or being afraid of the only thing that can save you. So we examine it. Now I'm sober. I come home and they've got the forks where the spoons are supposed to go. The toilet paper's on the roll backwards. The kids are wearing the wrong clothes and I'm out of my mind. And I'm not drinking. All of a sudden, I find myself a prey to misery and depression because I can't get my life to change. Why do you think I was drinking in the first place? I remember that all too well. And now I'm heading back towards alcoholic insanity. And they're saying, hey, we have something that we think is not only more beneficial, but more productive. And you say to me, okay, we're going to talk about this thing that my mind has been fettered and fixed idea and superstized, if that's a word, superstitioned about. And now I got to go to this and renounce all this to save myself. Talks about that in the 12 and 12. Well, that's a big order till I'm out of options. And again, by default, the gift had been there the whole time. Clancy calls it a disease of perception. My perception skewed, and I'm not so sure it was skewed by anyone other than the way I've been living my life, trying to get these things to be gone, trying to get rid of my depression, trying to get rid of the misery, trying to be helpful to people. Talks about it in the instructions for step 3. I'm trying to run the universe to get my way, and it's just not working. So I try a little bit harder. Well, these idiots didn't learn. Perhaps I'm living in the wrong city, county, state, or country. I've got to go somewhere to get people to do what I think they ought to do so I can be happy. And I don't realize that the more I do that, the more this insatiable appetite to have my own way grows, and I can't stop it. And this is telling us, guess what? You're thinking this whole chapter, remember, is about prejudice. It's about ignorance, obstinacy, agnosticism. It has nothing to do with trying to get me to believe in God, although it seems like that. So when you do that, like we were talking about the other day, I was working with Danny, who's on here, and Paul. And in the beginning of this chapter, it says, to one who feels he is an atheist, this solution for this death-defying disease that I now agree that I have is very untenable. In fact, for the atheist or agnostic, they feel it is impossible. And for those that are convinced that they believed it is unnecessary, that's the thought. So all of us are messed up at this dilemma, because for those who think they know, I'm not going to look for any more further investigation. And for those who think they know the opposite, I'm not open to any argument to the contrary. The problem is both of us stay blocked from the thing deep within us that can save us from ourselves, and we can't figure out why. Trouble with personal relationships. Every relationship that ever meant anything in my life ended in a restraining order. And I promise you, I never called a judge and said, can you tell them to leave me alone? I'm trying to get some sleep. Prey to misery and depression. Nadia talked about it. Suicidal ideation. Sober. People with time, long periods of abstinence because of their commitment to their not drinking no matter what. Put a rope around their throat, a bullet in their head, or jump off of a bridge because they're going to let you know I'm not drinking no matter what, and I meant it. And the fact of the matter is, if you looked on the obituary, it would say death by suicide, but in Alcoholics Anonymous in the rooms throughout, we know that it's alcoholism, and we don't call it that because we come in here and we get some misinformation that's not intentional. Believe me, I'm not finding fault with the fellowship. They seem to be doing a lot better than me. But the reality is, for most of us, don't drink and go to meetings. Don't drink no matter what. Or bring your butt to a meeting if it falls off, and we'll sew it back on us if we're surgeons. That is not a solution of depth and weight. So they're not trying to get us to believe in God, not here. They're trying to get us to believe in the hopelessness and futility of the way we are living our lives based on our thinking, our prejudice, and our own self-centered pursuit. If we don't get that, guess what? We'll go back to alcohol and think it's the problem again until I have nothing to blame alcohol on because I'm locked up and all alone and I can't get my hands on the drink and my life is not getting better. I don't know why I said all that, Nadja, but I did. Next.
Bill, it is important that you said all that because we tend to, like you said, we've got these people who are drinking no matter what. And they're sitting with that quiet desperation because nobody gonna stick up their hand and say, I do not look the way you do. What is wrong with me? We felt like that our whole lives. I do not look like others. What is wrong with me? Now we're sitting in AA saying, what is wrong with me? And the National Health Institute has, they've got statistics out that says that alcoholism untreated, which is page 52, that is what untreated alcoholism describes. And I'm gonna go to the doctor's opinion because Bill's just he's just fleshed out a whole beautiful monologue there on what the doctor's opinion is about untreated alcoholism. And he gives us a couple of lines and we're going to go into that now. But untreated alcoholism is on page 52 and we're going to bounce to doctor's opinion page XXVIII. So that's Roman numerals page 28. So while you're surfing to get back there, I'm just going to give you some statistics. Untreated alcoholism contributes to 25% of suicides. And they talk about it in our book many, many, many times. And I'm harping on this, and I'm glad you did what you did, Bill, because I have been in these rooms. You know my story. Oh, how did that?
Keep in mind, Nadia, that we use the term untreated alcoholism. You got frozen, Nadia. We use the term untreated alcoholism and always assume that that's sober. Drinking is untreated alcoholism as well. Let's not underestimate that. So if 25% of the suicides based on alcoholic condition or diagnoses is based on untreated sober alcoholism, 85% of our correction system incarcerations are as a result of untreated alcoholism, mostly under the influence of what we think is the magic elixir, which it is not. That's a big number. I looked it up, Nadja. We have 1.5 million people incarcerated in this country. Now, that's not a lot compared to the overall population, but 85% of them is 1.25 million. That's 2/3 the size of our fellowship. So guess what? While 2 million of us are trying to stay sober and treat this condition, the other 1.25 million didn't have a chance to treat the condition this way till after they were locked up and found that they couldn't get a drink or that it cost a lot more than they could afford and weren't willing to pay the price. Again, we use the term untreated alcoholism is drinking as well.
Many will pursue it to the gates of insanity, jails, or death. And it says here, so what we're talking about, this Dr. Silkworth, for some of you maybe joined us 5 years into this journey that we've been taking on Roman numerals, page 28, Dr. Silkworth describes an alcoholic. This is the malady. It says here, they are restless, irritable, and discontent unless they can at once and again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. But I'm going to stop because we're talking about people who aren't drinking in this program, in these rooms, in these meetings. So let's line out the word drink. We're in these rooms, we're going out of our mind, and we can't tell anyone that we're going out of our mind because our skin is crawling, we're restless, we're irritable, we're discontent, we're not sleeping, we're plagued by depression. We've just spoken about the symptoms. And what are we doing? We're death scrolling hours and hours on TikTok and Netflix and Insta, and I don't know what else other apps we've got going. It's hours go by before we know that we've been on those apps for hours. Or we're stuffing our face with food and then we're eating another hour later again. Sugar, sugar, more sugar. I don't know what it is that you're doing, but I know for me, it's sugar. That's when I'm not plugged in and I'm drifting and I'm restless, irritable, discontent, and I'm not spiritually fit, I dive into a pile of sugar. The legal cocaine.
Say one more thing about that, because there's a difference, I believe, from withdrawal from alcohol when my body's demanding the next drink and I can't get one. I know that restless, irritable, and discontentedness that the doctor's talking about. He's so brilliant in his writing that he segues in two different periods of that doctor's opinion that we put at the front of the book. The first is where he's describing for most folks, drinking means a certain thing, right? Most people drink because they like the effect. Very few people drink whiskey because it tastes good. There are some abnormal people that get a thrill out of drinking whiskey and think it tastes good, but most people drink for the effect produced by alcohol. That's described in the vision for you: conviviality, camaraderie, all that good stuff, care, release from boredom and worry. But then it kind of segues into the alcoholic drinking, and we think that alcoholics are the only ones who drink for the effect. That's not what he's saying. He's saying most people drink for the effect. We get a different effect and we pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. The other thing is, once I am medically detoxed, the restless, irritable, and discontentedness from not being able to satisfy the craving has been remedied. What we're talking about here goes way beyond that. Now I'm in a sober condition and I'm uncomfortable in my own skin. Like you talked about it, Nadja, the people at work look up at you and you want to know why. The boss wants to see you and you know you're getting fired, so you walk in and throw his desk over and tell him you didn't want the job anyhow, and all he was there to do was give you a raise and promote you because you're such a stellar employee. You come home, you're on edge. You got resentments. You think the world's out to get you, and you're coming from a position of self. That's the type of spiritual unrest that they're talking about in this chapter. And sometimes because we love that term, I'm restless, irritable, discontent. No, you're selfish and self-centered. They're not talking about coming off of a drink, because there's some other chemicals that when I couldn't get the next hit, it felt like the world was coming to an end. But guess what? When the craving finally got starved, and all of a sudden I was back in a condition where I didn't crave it physically, I didn't have that condition anymore. But then the new one woke up. I wonder why people are looking at me, what they're saying about me, what they're thinking about me, as if I can read their minds. That's what this is right here. These bedevilments, they live inside of us. The other is brought about by me administering alcohol and setting the craving in motion and then not being able to satisfy it at the moment I need it satisfied. I just thought I'd make that clear. Put that down on the recording, because very few people in AA will go that deep in their thoughts.
Thank you. All right, let's get back to the book, page 52. Thanks, Bill. We're down at the second last paragraph. When we saw others solve their problems, so there's a bunch of people on this platform that are like, and that you follow with the flyers because they've got something that you want. They're smiley, happy, shiny people. They've got sparkles flying out of their eyes. They're quoting the book left, right, and center. They're sponsoring like monsters, but there's just something about them, right? Okay, so when we see those solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe. So for you guys who've got some beef with God, there's a nice word for you: spirit of the universe. Spirit of the universe, grant me the serenity to accept all the things. We had to stop doubting the power of God. We are not here to get you to meet God. We are here to broker your relationship with the power of God so that you can solve your problems and live. I don't care who your God is. I don't care what you call it. I don't care how you serve it. I don't care how you worship it. I care. My job as a sponsor, my job as someone who's armed with the facts and whose the whole department shouts that I have a solution, is I want to connect you to the power of God. That's it. And it says here, our ideas did not work. What does it say on page 59? We hold on to our old ideas, and the result is nil, zero, nada, nix, nix. No joy, no recovery, no happiness. You're just hanging in and you're living on page 52. But the God idea did what? It works. It works. Chapter 5. It's a bold statement.
I'd like to propose that we understand what the word of means. That's a powerful word. Of, and I looked it up because it struck me when I was realizing what it says deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. I always assume that it's my idea. And if it's idea of God, it says it's expressing the relationship between a part and a whole, expressing the relationship between a scale or measure and a value. So if it's an idea of God, maybe it's not my idea about, because that's what I assume it's saying. Maybe the idea is coming from God, because that's what the definition is. So it says here we had to stop doubting the power of God. It's his power. I don't have to acknowledge it. I don't have to believe in it. I don't have to understand it. I can even deny that it exists, but it doesn't take away the power of God, which is part and parcel of that. So deep down in every man, woman, child is going to tell us in a few pages, which we'll probably get to by sometime in January. It's saying that what's in this is of him, not about him. This is not my idea of God, as if it's a belief in or about. It's his idea. And I think I never doubted the power of God. I did on occasion underestimate the power of alcohol and drugs. That was the problem.
So just on that note, just for 3-4 seconds, because we didn't kick off this meeting with the meditation, just for 3 or 4 seconds, let's feel the power of God, because whether we like it or not, we're swimming in this stuff. Thanks. We'll just zoot it up to the realm of the spirit. I got to hang out with all of you there for a couple of seconds. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. They had faith, guys. They had faith. They had faith. And a lot of us come in here and there's a flimsy reed that we cling to, and later on we find it out to be the powerful, loving hand of God. They had faith and that thing took off. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the, remember your highlighter that I asked you to nominate as your thinking highlighter? What color it is? I don't know what color it is for anybody who's new. Get a color that will highlight all the thinking words in this book. Here it is. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea, thinking word, bring out your thinking highlighter, that self-sufficiency. I got this. I got this. I sort out my stuff. I always have. I don't need you. I've always sorted out my stuff. I was always left alone when I was a kid. I got this. I got this. Okay. And if I don't got this, I'm going to got this tomorrow. When others showed us, when others, those armed with the facts, those who've got what we want, those crazy fellowship of the spirit cats that are running around in these meetings, when they showed us that God's sufficiency worked for them, We began to feel like those who had insisted the rights would never fly. We began to feel like those people. Maybe, just maybe, just maybe, this God idea is going to work. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. No, we didn't like it. We flipping loved that stuff. We freaking rolled around in that stuff. We still like it. It is not by chance that we were given the power to reason. We were given, but hold on, Nadia, what the hell? You're telling me to get out my thinking co-key, my thinking highlighter, because you're telling me that this disease centers in my mind. You're telling me, you've just taken me through the carpet slipper dude, man of 30 with the whiskey, bottle of whiskey and his carpet slippers, Fred, Jim, and you're telling me I cannot rely on my thinking, but now you're telling me that we were given the power to reason? Yeah, honey. You're a child of God. You were given the power to reason. He gave you brains to use. Where does it say that? On page 85. Let's go. Page 85, second paragraph. It says there, for after all, God gave us brains to use. We were given the power to think, but we need to align that stuff. We need to align it, and we need to be spiritually fit. And there will be instructions later on when we do get there in year, I don't know, 4,000, 40, 50, I don't know where we're at. I don't even know what year we're in. I'm joking. I do know where we're at. I just kind of lose time when I'm here with you beautiful people. To examine the evidence of our senses and to draw conclusions. There you are. We come in here broke, busted, disgusted, not to be trusted, but by some beautiful transformation, this psychic change that happens when, as a result of these steps, we get to listen to these amazing promises. We get to examine the evidence of our senses. We get to draw conclusions. We have the power to reason. Man, I couldn't trust my thinking when I walked in these rooms. In fact, I still got to check in with my God squad. I still got to go to pause land. And it's instruction in our morning pages 84 to 88. I've still got to pause. I still got to check in. I've got to ask. I've got to pray. Not in that order. It's praying first, just by the way. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We, agnostically inclined, would not feel, there's our problem, we're all up in our feelings, satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, yeah, guys, get out your thinking highlighters, have them handy. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw our hands up and down and said, we don't know. The most powerful statement an alcoholic or an addict can utter in their lives. Help me, I don't know. Help me, and I don't know. I don't have the answers. Oh man, the magic happens when you can say that. Bill was just referring to this, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization that we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or God is nothing. Guys, we come in here and we get told that we got black and white thinking, or we got to start shifting over to some gray thinking. So I got some news for you. For if you're an alcoholic of the real variety, the real hopeless variety with an alcoholic mind, and we can go back and talk about that ad nauseum. There's a whole chapter dedicated to that. We have two propositions. We have two options in our life. God is everything or God is nothing. We go to the bitter ends or we accept spiritual help. What is your choice to be? And I'm going to end on that.
I'm glad you said that before we stopped the recording. Let me say one thing is brilliant what you just said. You went from a real to a hopeless, because me and Josh were talking about this. And sometimes we get on the bandwagon. When Roland went to Carl Jung, and Carl Jung told him, I've been unsuccessful with an alcoholic of your persuasion. I come to regard you as hopeless. Dr. Silkworth tells us what a real alcoholic is. It's someone who has an allergy to the liquid drug alcohol. It's called a phenomenon of craving. If you have that, you're a real alcoholic. There's no such thing as an artificial one. However, the condition to where you can't trust yourself, you drink on the way home from detox or maybe have it smuggled in. That's a hopeless state of mind and body. Not everyone is in that persuasion either, but it doesn't take away from the fact that if you have the allergy to alcohol, you have the diagnosis of alcoholism, and that's as real as it gets. Some of us are a little more stubborn. And lastly, I'll say this last paragraph and a half that you spent the time on, we might even revisit it next week and put off getting to the end of this chapter till February, March of next year, because it's talking about how we're worshiping our minds, the God of intellect, our logic, our ability to reason. I'm going to think my way out of what I got myself into. Right? I can't stop with my mind what I start with my body. Once I put a drink inside of me, no matter how much mental willpower I apply, I can't stop. I'm relying on that flawed state of thinking to solve a problem that only a spiritual experience will conquer. So that's a powerful chapter. And when I go to these other meetings that Kurt and Rob's other buddies practice, they teach us not what to think, but how to think. And I worship a lot of what I was taught to think that doesn't serve me, but it's hard because I've worshiped it for so long. Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, crew. Your
Thanks,
turns.
my brother. Thanks, Rob. Oh, it was awesome being here with everyone. We had